How the Akatsuki members compare in terms of power is a topic that has been talked about to death at this point. With how iconic and popular the Akatsuki are, and how strong most members are for when they were introduced, it's no wonder these comparisons are made so frequently. Ranking the Akatsuki in terms of power is an incredibly common way to do this. While everyone has their differences with their ranking of the group, there are some general ideas most seem to agree on, and you usually won't see a member ranked way higher or lower than you think they should be, regardless of whose list it actually is. However, one member seems to be consistently held in too high of a regard for my liking. Kisame is pretty consistently ranked as one of the stronger Akatsuki members, and I think this is just absolutely ridiculous. With this conception of how strong Kisame is mainly stemming from misinterpretations of his fights, which is what I want to cover in today's video. To be clear, every member of the Akatsuki is generally strong when compared to the world of Naruto at large. This video is just me explaining why Kisame is not nearly as strong as many people seem to think. Meaning, I won't be covering Kisame's arsenal and scaling extensively as if this is a how strong is video. I will be simply pushing back on arguments and views I see as invalid regarding Kisame. Now, before I begin, I would massively appreciate it if you liked the video and subscribe. I make videos just like this one about various series weekly, so if you enjoy this one, I'll have more for you in the future. To start off, I want to specify I won't be talking much about part 1. Kisame barely does anything, and his feats are just unimpressive. He seems to be around the level of the part 1 Konoha Jonin, with Asuma reacting to him, Guy reacting to him, and Kakashi reacting to him. However, he does pretty clearly get stronger after part 1, so this just isn't relevant to talk about. This is pretty clearly shown when a 30% clone that is confirmed to be weakened kept up with Guy, whereas in part 1, the real Kisame was reacted to by Guy. And knowing Guy's personality and work ethic, he almost certainly grew stronger between part 1 and part 2, due to just his constant training. So a nerfed Kisame is keeping up with a stronger Guy, clearly implying he grew stronger during the time skip. But as I said, I just don't care much to discuss part 1, because the misinterpretations around Kisame don't stem from here anyways. The first thing that I think is important to cover when talking about Kisame is his fight with Killer Bee. There's a lot to cover with them, as I've heard various things people use from this fight to scale Kisame that are all pretty clearly misinterpretations, and lead to Kisame being held as stronger than he really should be. The first thing that needs to be established is that Kisame just does not scale to B, when discussing the actual physical stats at least. At best, Kisame scales to base B, but we'll get into why that might not even be true in a minute. For now, I want to address the notion that Kisame reacts to B using a Biju cloak, and thus is actually comparable to that B in terms of speed. This is just wrong because Samehada reacts for Kisame. This is the only instance of Kisame reacting to B using a Biju cloak, and it is directly commented on that Samehada was moving on its own. So this doesn't directly show the speed of Kisame. Samehada is never seen responding to attacks for the user, either before or after the fight with B. We know Samehada was abnormally riled up against B due to taking a liking to B's octopus-flavored chakra, so it's safe to say this was only done because of B's special chakra, meaning this level of speed that Samehada had wouldn't matter really in any other fight with Kisame. Samehada's reaction to B is very specific to B, and not just because of chakra volume or something. Not only has Kisame obviously fought Jinchuriki before, being an Akatsuki member, but we see him steal Kurama's chakra in part 1, and Samehada doesn't react the way it does to B. On top of Kisame not reacting to B using his own speed, it wasn't even a full power B that he actually reacted to. Obviously B was only in V1, but on top of this, B only used 7 tails. Not only do we know less tails means less power when it comes to Biju cloaks, but it is also commented on that using this weaker cloak means B is yet to be taking the fight seriously. Considering B's personality, him holding back, even on an Akatsuki member, is not unreasonable. I mean, he literally took notes mid-fight against Taka. He clearly doesn't feel the need to go all out just because someone is from the Akatsuki. Later, we do see what happens when B actually goes all out against Kisame, and it just further shows Kisame is not on B's level. I say all out despite the fact that B only entered V2 and not full Biju mode, because he wanted to enter Biju mode, but was unable to due to not wanting to harm the bystanders of the fight. So this was B using the max power he could. Despite this limitation, B completely blissed Kisame once entering V2, and also blew his torso open, an attack that would have certainly been fatal had it not been for Kisame's regeneration. It may seem like I'm being a little unfair at this point by saying if Kisame didn't have part of his arsenal, then the fight would have gone differently, but where this is actually relevant is that Kisame heals by taking in the chakra Samehada stole from B. As we know, B has a massive chakra quantity, so there's nothing showing Kisame can heal this level of damage without stealing large sums of chakra first. All this to say, B showed pretty clearly with this feat that Kisame can't keep up with B's higher forms even when Samehada is reacting for him. Now, with how Kisame compares to B's cloaks out of the way, I want to address Kisame in comparison to base B. Kisame does react to base B without help from Samehada, but I don't think this is actually all that impressive when taken into context. As I mentioned earlier, it's stated B isn't taking the fight with Kisame seriously, and this is after Kisame's only feats against base B. Now, you can interpret B not being serious to mean two things: that B isn't going full power even in his base form, or that he isn't serious because he isn't using Biju cloaks. Of course, one of these would mean Kisame actually scales to base B, and one would mean he doesn't due to B being suppressed. I'm not even going to argue about which view I think is more supported, because regardless of what you think B not being serious means, it would remain true that Kisame's feats on B aren't that impressive. For example, in Sasuke's fight with B, it's very obvious B isn't going all out. But remember, this is also true with Kisame, and however you interpret the way in which B holds back, whether it's just not using cloaks or suppressing himself in base, there's no reason it would be different between the fight with Sasuke and the fight with Kisame. When actually comparing Sasuke's performance to Kisame's, Sasuke just blatantly does better against base B. Kisame reacts to B once, where B ran at him from a distance, where Sasuke blocked multiple barrages from B before finally being overwhelmed. On top of this, B used the 8 swords on Sasuke, which he did not use on Kisame. So Kisame reacting to base B once really isn't all that special, when a Sasuke without Orochimaru's chakra, and still recovering from his fight with Itachi, is able to react to B, and in a more impressive fashion than Kisame did. Now, because I'm basically just saying B isn't that impressive in base, I want to touch on the idea that B in base is relative to KCM1 Naruto, making Kisame relative to Naruto as well. Now, I do actually think B scales to KCM1 Naruto, but I do not think Kisame does, as B only shows this level of power in the war arc, where he is clearly stronger. To show how B got stronger, the easiest way is to look at how he compares to his brother A. Against Kisame, B used a V1 cloak to match A's V1 cloak when performing the lariat, whereas in the war, base B was able to overpower V2 Raikage in a lariat clash. This whole scene is also meant to show B finally being at the level where A no longer needs to hold back in order to perform the lariat like he did in the past, which of course implies B had not reached this level prior to this point. B getting stronger is also just pretty expected when he's clearly dedicated to training, with his first on-screen appearance literally being him training, as well as B saying that fighting is like a form of training. So B being on KCM1 Naruto's level is totally fine. It's just that Kisame fights a different B than the one who compares to Naruto. This should be obvious considering Kisame being on KCM1's level is pretty inconsistent when KCM1 blitzed Kisame. I know some people will point out that Kisame was weakened here, but Kisame only seems to be left emaciated after leaving Samehada. This scene is meant to show off the insane speed of Naruto's new form, and Kisame calls Keisamon's speed unbelievable. So it would be weird from a writing standpoint to have this feat be on a weakened Kisame and just not really matter. Now, another really common argument for Kisame is using his brief fight with Guy to scale him to Guy when he's using 6 or 7 gates. But this doesn't work for a few reasons. First off, Kisame is potentially amped against Guy. Prior to fighting Guy, Kisame steals chakra from B and Aoba, and we know Kisame grows stronger based on his opponent due to his ability to steal chakra. Now, the reason I said potentially amped is Kisame was in a very weakened state prior to taking this chakra. So it is possible Kisame only replenished himself to his normal level of power and was not stronger than he is normally. I'll be totally honest and say I see no way to confirm if Kisame is stronger than normal or not, but I wanted to bring it up regardless as it is a very real possibility. Now, aside from the potential amp via stealing chakra, Kisame says himself he has an advantage from the water when engaging with Guy. I know some people will say this is irrelevant since Kisame can just summon water, but he never makes a body of water on a similar scale to the one he was in against Guy. Kisame was literally in the ocean when fighting Guy, and we get some angles showing that the part of the ocean they were in was quite deep. We see when Kisame summons water in his previous fight with Guy, the water is rather shallow and there is no scan where it looks like an expansive area that he covered, nothing like an ocean. This was a nerfed Kisame clone who was limited in jutsu to be fair, but it still stands he has never shown the ability to summon a body of water as large as the one he fought Guy in. And him calling out how it's a special advantage would indicate he just can't do this in every fight. Even aside from all these potential amps and advantages, Kisame just does not scale to Guy when he's using the gates. Base Guy is actually able to react to Kisame's jutsu, and Kisame gets tagged by base Guy. With the gates making you dozens of times stronger, it would obviously make no sense for Kisame to be on the level of Gates Guy when base Guy can already contend with him. On top of it being inconsistent, Kisame's feats against Guy just do not show he's relative. When fighting 6th Gate Guy, Guy had sufficient power to deal with Kisame. Guy was destroying all of Kisame's sharks. What gave Guy issues was the sheer amount of sharks. This insane area of effect can easily be attributed to the terrain advantage Kisame has. The reason I think this is mainly due to the terrain is that Kisame mentions the advantage of the terrain and then literally in the next panel summons the sharks. But even at best, saying Kisame can do this normally, the area of effect shows Kisame's insane chakra and not his power. We already know Kisame has unreal chakra. Neji says a 30% clone of Kisame has more chakra than anyone he's seen, with the exception of Naruto. So at best, Kisame can give Guy some issues just via sheer volume of attacks, but this is being charitable to Kisame, and in reality, it seems he can only pressure Guy due to terrain. Now, for the 7th gate, I still frequently see people claim Kisame somehow scales to 7th gate Guy based on their interaction, when the interaction is just Kisame being one-shot. The anime may portray it as Kisame's jutsu clashing with Hirodora somewhat, but the manga shows no such thing. The two attacks just hit each other, and Kisame is then overwhelmed with no relativity implied. Kisame being anywhere near 7th gate Guy is also just clearly ridiculous, when Guy can deal with Kisame's attacks in lower forms, as I explained prior. Overall, Kisame is only a top-tier Akatsuki under certain context, or when using poor interpretations. I say certain context because Kisame can grow stronger based upon his opponent, so he can definitely be matchup dependent. But even taking this into account, he never displays anything impressive without heavy context as to why he looks impressive, even beyond amping himself using his opponent's chakra. When taking into account all of the context, Kisame really has no scaling, at least nothing relevant to the top tier Akatsuki members. The only standout trait of Kisame is his arsenal of abilities, which are context dependent and won't function as well against most opponents as they did against B or Guy, which is why I call Kisame a massive fraud.